Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are cutting straight into a case that is just a stunning example of institutional failure. We're talking about the 1984 death of Rowena Wilkinson Zapalac in Flatonia, Texas. Rowena was only 20 years old. She was found dead in her studio apartment, and the official ruling from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. It wasn't just shocking, it was grotesque.
It really was.
They classified her death as accidental, specifically suicide by masturbation. And then they opened and closed the case on the very same day.
Which is just, that fact alone is mind-boggling. And that ruling, so painful and dismissive, it casts this 40-year shadow. Our mission today is to dig into the source material, really trace the fight, led by Rowena's sister, Joleta Wilkinson.
Right.
She has spent 4 decades proving this was never an accident, it was a homicide, and it was concealed by, just complete indifference and totally overlooked evidence.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what happened right after is so crucial. The sheriff's office basically just hands the apartment back to the family.
Yeah.
So Joleta and her father go in to clean the scene. And what they find completely contradicts the neat and tidy closed case the police reported.
Think about that. The system fails so badly that her own family becomes the investigators, finding clues that the professionals either missed or just threw away.
Exactly. So, the official story. Rowena found nude in her studio above a saddle shop, a nylon rope around her neck, attached to the bed frame, and a sex toy on the bed.
And the key for them was no sign of forced entry.
Yes, that was their whole justification for closing it so fast.
But what Joleta and her father saw it was chaos. It was a struggle, not some carefully staged accident.
She noted these little details that say so much, right? Like scattered pennies all over the floor.
Scattered pennies? Who does that to themselves? It suggests a scuffle, things getting knocked over.
And the physical damage that was just ignored. There was a broken kitchen window, glass on the floor.
So much for no forced entry.
Right. And on top of that, a full day after she's found, there's still water in the shower stall.
The shower was wet. That suggests someone used it recently, probably to clean up, and then left in a hurry. That's not a person who was alone.
And this next piece of evidence is, for me, the most damning.
Right.
It points straight to an institutional cover-up.
The acrylic nail.
Yes. Rowena used a heavy coffee table to block her door because it didn't lock. And near that table, Joleta finds a broken acrylic nail with blood on it.
And her father, he does the right thing. He gives that bloody nail directly to an investigator at the scene.
But years later, when Joleta finally gets the case files,
it's gone.
Vanished.
Because it was never logged. It was never put into the official evidence log, which is, a mandatory step. You have to record every single thing you collect. Its absence isn't just an oversight. It's a fundamental breakdown of the process.
And you have to remember the context here. We're talking 1980s, small town Texas. Law enforcement's word was basically gospel.
Absolutely. The family was facing this incredibly painful, embarrassing ruling. The pressure to just be quiet and accept it, especially with Rowena having a young son, must have been immense.
So the case stays closed. But Joleta keeps fighting, and eventually she gets the original autopsy report. And this is where the official story just completely falls apart.
Oh, it collapses. The forensic evidence from 1984 confirms a violent struggle. It confirms a third person was there. It was all written down and then just ignored.
Okay, let's drill down on that report. What did it say?
First, the signs of struggle. The autopsy specifically notes a missing right fourth fingernail.
Which matches the broken, bloody nail Joleta found.
Exactly. It also documented scratches on Rowena's neck. But the real smoking gun is the evidence of restraint.
The bruises.
The bruises. It's definitive. The report describes symmetrical linear bruises on the inner parts of both of her upper arms. The pathologist even wrote that their size and position suggested she was gripped from behind by fingertips.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate. How do we know for sure those weren't self-inflicted? Couldn't someone argue that in, the context of autoerotic asphyxiation, maybe she did it to herself to heighten the sensation?
That's a great question, and the key word is symmetrical. When someone tries to restrain themselves, the grip is usually awkward. It's asymmetrical because you're using your dominant hand. The bruising wouldn't be so perfect. These were parallel linear bruises, like fingertips digging in to hold her still. That's not self-inflicted. That's an assailant.
And beyond the physical marks, the biological samples tell a story that was never investigated.
Not at all. The bed sheets had a large diluted blood stain, foreign hairs, not Rowena's, and a small amount of sperm. And crucially, sperm was also found inside Rowena.
We have to go back to that ridiculous initial ruling. Suicide by masturbation. I mean, we need to talk about how incredibly rare autoerotic asphyxiation is in women.
The statistics are just astronomical. The ratio is something like 50 men for every 1 woman. Before 1980, there were only 2 documented cases of this happening to a woman ever. The odds are practically 0.
And then there's the little details of the scene. She was still wearing a thick beaded necklace. The autopsy noted the rope was placed over it.
Why would you do that? It makes no sense if you're staging something yourself.
And the police just brushed off the biological evidence. They said the semen just proved she'd had sex recently and it had nothing to do with her death.
It's an insane conclusion to draw. You combine the restraint bruises, the foreign hairs, the blood, the sperm. That's not an accident. That is a violent encounter. That is a homicide.
And what about the toxicology screen?
Also interesting, Rowena had a very low blood alcohol level, 0.07, and 0 marijuana in her system.
But there was a marijuana roach found right there in an ashtray by the bed.
Right, so she wasn't smoking it, which strongly suggests someone else was there, using drugs, and just left it behind when they fled.
This all shifts the case from a single tragic mistake into something much darker, a potential pattern. And the first big break doesn't come for over 2 decades, not until 2006.
That's when the Texas Rangers call Joleta, and they don't ask about her sister's suicide.
No. They ask if Rowena knew a woman named Melody Bush.
And suddenly, the dots start to connect, 20 years too late. Melody Ann Bush, 26 years old, was murdered just 6 months before Rowena in March of 1984.
In the exact same small town.
Flatonia, and the one place both women were seen alive right before they died.
The Stag Club, a local bar.
Yep. Melody's body was found about 12 days after she vanished. Her death was ruled a homicide, but the cause was listed as acute acetone poisoning.
Acetone poisoning. That is so specific, almost clinical.
It is. It suggests some kind of premeditation or maybe a killer who worked with chemicals. It doesn't sound chaotic.
So if you put it all together, the failure to link these 2 deaths, one called a homicide, one a suicide, it completely blinded the authorities.
Yeah.
They could have been looking for a local predator right then and there.
And that failure gave the killer a window to operate, maybe even to escalate.
So when the Rangers called Joleta in 2006, they're chasing a lead, a very big lead. Suspect number 1, Robert Charles Browne.
Browne is a truly chilling figure, a serial confessor, highly manipulative. He claimed he killed 48 or 49 people across 9 states. He claimed 7 in Texas.
A very disorganized killer, right?
Yeah.
His methods were all over the place. Strangling, stabbing, poison.
All over the place. And in 2003, he sends this cryptic letter confessing to a murder in Flatonia, Texas, around 84 or 85. The Rangers immediately think of Melody Bush.
But his story doesn't add up.
Not at all. He writes down Flatonia ether ice pick and claims he stabbed Melody 2 or 3 times, but her autopsy was clear. Acetone poisoning, no stab wounds.
And when they push him on it,
He denies using acetone. The whole thing feels off, like he's just grabbing details he might have heard.
Joleta actually suspected him at first because Rowena had briefly dated a guy named Rob Browne.
But when reporters track down Robert Charles Browne, he says he has no idea who Rowena is. And then he refuses to talk about Melody unless he gets paid. He actually told investigators, no pay, no play.
Unbelievable. He just seems like a red herring, you know? A distraction from someone. Local.
And that's the big question. Was the killer hiding in plain sight?
Which brings us to suspect number 2, Cooper Cherry.
Cooper Cherry was the ex-husband of Rowena's neighbor and friend, Ruby. And he has direct links to both women on the nights they died.
Let's start with Melody Bush.
Okay.
Cooper Cherry was one of 2 people seen partying with Melody right before she went to the Stag Club that night.
And the connection to Rowena.
They crossed paths the very night she died. Rowena and Ruby had just dropped Ruby's son off with his father, Cooper, just a few hours before Rowena was found.
And then there's the shower. We have to come back to the shower.
Yes. The morning Rowena is found dead, Cooper and his friend, Bart Moore, who was also reportedly at the Stag Club show up at Ruby's apartment.
And they need to use her shower. They say they don't have hot water.
Wait a minute, they need a shower. Rowena's apartment is right next door. And her shower was found wet later that day.
It's too much of a coincidence. It suggests they were at the scene, they cleaned up, and they walked away. Exactly. But the suspicion around Cooper Cherry doesn't even stop there. He's linked to a third suspicious death.
His first wife, Rhonda Stahl.
Rhonda died in what was called a single-car rollover accident back in 1980, less than 10 months after they got married.
And the investigation into her death.
There was no autopsy performed.
Of course not.
Her death was just ruled accidental, fell asleep at the wheel. So you have 3 suspicious deaths, all in the same small area, all connected to one man. The pattern is It's impossible to ignore.
And this is where the small-town power dynamics really come into play. Rowena's separated husband said that Cooper Cherry came from a very prominent local family.
A very prominent family. His father was on the board of the town bank, and coincidentally, so was the father of Rowena's separated husband.
In a place like Flatonia, that kind of influence, it's not about politics, it's about control. And a messy homicide investigation involving a prominent family is the last thing local police want.
So an administrative ruling, accidental suicide, accidental death, becomes a shield. It closes the books, it protects reputations, and it explains why evidence disappears and why witnesses, even years later, are afraid to talk.
So where does that leave us? We have overwhelming forensic evidence saying this was a homicide. We have a potential local suspect linked to 2 other deaths. And yet, after 40 years, Rowena's death is officially still a suicide.
But that long, long period of inertia is finally being challenged. Joleta's persistence, her advocacy, it has forced them to reevaluate.
As of 2025, she has a meeting scheduled with the Texas Rangers and the Attorney General's office.
And the goal is to formally discuss reopening the case, and this is the most important part, changing that death certificate to homicide.
Because that change unlocks everything, right?
Yeah.
It triggers the resources for a real cold case investigation.
Absolutely. It means they can finally use modern tools like forensic genetic genealogy on those biological samples they archived back in 1984, the sperm, the hairs. They could finally get an answer.
It's just an incredible story of advocacy, of forcing an institution to look at truths that they just willfully ignored for decades.
It really is, and it leaves you with a pretty stark lesson. In this world where we're overloaded with information, sometimes the most important facts aren't new. They're the original facts, like a pathologist's clear finding of restraint, that were just buried for convenience. And if a death certificate can be based on appearances rather than documented forensic science, you have to wonder what other case-closed files out there are hiding the truth. You might want to explore just how deeply local influence can impact justice in these small, tightly knit communities.